welcome to our architecture task force meeting. Last week, Tom had suggested that we bring in Jorge Flores to talk to us about the use case that he's been working on with the farm workers and the credentializing the farm workers. So we have Jorge here to talk to us about that, give us a presentation, and we can discuss kind of the work that he's been doing and see how that fits in with what we're doing here at the OpenWallet Foundation. The other thing that I did notice on the Discord chat was a message about different types of credentials and the way in which we might want to work with the different sorts of data format and security that we have. I don't see Sean on the call as of yet. If he does join, maybe we can get him to talk to us a bit about that. Drummond, I also saw that you shared some information about some work that's already being done on different sorts of wallet credential profiles. So maybe when Jorge is done, you can bring us up to speed on kind of that work and what's been done there.
Sure.
Does that sound like a good agenda for today?
Does to me.
All right, great. Well, Jorge, thank you for joining us today. And we'll hand the floor over to you for the moment and let us know about what you're doing with the credentials for the farm workers.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I was excited to hear of the OpenWallet Foundation and the task at hand. And definitely appreciative of the opportunity to present to you all. I am a co-founder of we're an employee bootstrap startup, Entidad. We're working with a couple of organizations for the last couple of years to digitally help them digitally transform. But also, apply decentralized ID and VCs as an enabler to really scale their impact. So specifically, we're based out of Southern California, Los Angeles. Our use case today that I'm going to be presenting is an ecosystem. We've been contributing member, largely passive observers, but avidly absorbing everything that's coming out of the trust over IP over the last couple of years, and really trying to align our work to these efforts. So our use case is really trying to build a digital trust services ecosystem with national scale. Today, we have 9 organizations that are in scope for the solutions that we've been building, and like many of the folks on this call and then the organizations that you all represent, we're designing with privacy by design and security first approach, and where we think that decentralized protocols like digital ID and verifiable credentials are an enabler because they really allow for more privacy control for the end user, the wallet holders, authentic connections, which is a great term that I heard Drummond speak of recently, and consent-driven data sharing, being transparent in what data is collected and what data is shared between these organizations and the farm worker community that they're serving. So over the last couple of years, we've been busy building a few solutions. We've got 4 solutions that are live in production today, and one solution that's soon to go to market. I would say in the next couple of months. What we have here on the right side is just a quick overview of what these solutions are. We have the immigration services case management system that will allow farm worker serving organizations that have accredited legal representatives, so attorneys, caseworkers, accredited by the Department of Justice, to provide free pro bono legal services, legal assistance to farm workers and their families in the resolution of their respective immigration cases. So today we're live with this app, specifically the DACA renewal use case. And for those of you that aren't familiar with DACA, that's a program instituted a few years ago that provides children of immigrants who weren't born in the U.S. but have been raised here in the U.S. It provides it's not necessarily immigration status, but it provides them the safety of not being deported should there be issues with their employment. So it basically, DACA is a program that enables children of immigrants who've come to the U.S., who work in the U.S., to basically allow, they can attain employment and they can do so without fear of deportation. So this is the first use case that we're actively working on to implement. The solution is live. And we've also got a labor marketplace that we're working with Cierto. Cierto Global is another nonprofit organization based out of Washington, state of Washington. And they're an ethical farm worker labor recruiter. So their whole operating model is transparency and recruitment of farm worker labor. So they have an active network of growers and farmers here in the U.S. Cierto handles recruitment, boots on the ground, in their place of origin. They first started in Mexico, but they're proactively trying to recruit along with partnerships in Guatemala, El Salvador. This labor marketplace allows Cierto to manage the service agreements with the employers, the growers that are bringing in farm workers through this program. And then the USDA Farm and Food Workers Relief Program. This is a program that was announced last year. Congress earmarked $670 million to be dedicated to direct pandemic relief to agriculture workers and grocery workers and meat packers. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago, the USDA announced the grant recipients for this program. And the UFW Foundation, along with 9 other organizations captured here, were recipients of a grant of $98 million. So we've been hard at work building a solution, which has been named since Alivio. Alivio is Spanish for relief. And through this solution, these 9 organizations are going to distribute $600 debit cards to farm workers here in the US who have been affected by the pandemic. So today I'm going to be talking about our digital agent, which is a native app that we've been hard at work developing. And this digital agent is being developed to serve as a conduit, as a primary channel for farm workers to engage with their trusted service providers. So it not only embeds a digital wallet, specifically a custodial wallet. It also provides other capabilities, which, to use Drummond Reed's term recently in the podcast that he was on with SSI Orbit, utilities that enable privacy preserving trusted interactions between service providers and the farm workers. I'll stop for a minute for any questions.
So is this picture, are all of the functions shown in this picture something you're planning, that the app, the digital agent app has now, or that you're planning, in the future?
The capabilities in this slide are capabilities that I'm planning on demoing at this, if there are no questions, I'd like to jump into a demo.
Fantastic.
So I was one question about Custodio. Are you talking about, are these wallets only for the holder of the phone, or do they also handle other people who might be related to the holder?
That's a good question. And I think it's a very important question. I should have started with kind of explaining some of the challenges specific to this demographic, because I think it'll help explain some of the decisions we made in our approach to this digital agent. So Farmworker is here in the US. It's estimated, nobody knows for sure, because the community is largely immigrant, largely undocumented. It's estimated that there's between 2 and 9 million farm workers and their families here in the US. So that's kind of the numbers that we're working for, trying to build for that scale. We recognize that to reach that scale, open source is going to play a significant role in the ability for these organizations that we're directly working with, but others to be able to really bring value to this community at that scale. Language is important. Spanish is the dominant language in this community, but it's not the only one. There's a large swath of farm workers that are indigenous. Zapoteco, Mixteco, and there are farm workers from other parts of the world as well. Philippines. It's quite a large demographic. But those are some of the challenges that we're designing around, is this digital divide. What we know over the last couple of years in the interactions that we've been able to gather data for, phone numbers and email addresses are not reliable sources of information to identify these individuals. Phone numbers, they rotate, they change. Farm workers swap phones quite regularly, quite frequently, because they're seasonal workers. So a lot of them travel from their native countries here to the US. They opt for low cost plans, low cost devices. And so we see that there's a lot of churn in terms of the devices that farm workers are using. We don't know for sure, but we believe that the majority of farm workers use Android users versus iOS, but we don't know for sure. And we hope that when we roll out this app over the next quarter or so, that we will start getting better insights into what's the predominant platform for this demographic. We would like in the future to be able to support a single device that allows multiple members of a household to be able to manage their credentials, manage their IDs in a way that's privacy preserving. So we do know that in many farm worker families, a single device is shared. And so that presents a design challenge for us. And how do we do that to ensure that we can positively identify individuals when they're the ones that are actually interacting through these services? The challenge of wallet recovery is one that we haven't solved for yet, and we're looking at how the market and how other players in this space are trying to solve that challenge. What we've been largely focused on is building up the infrastructure to be able to support these basic, I call them building blocks, right, where we can assemble these different capabilities to provide the ability for farm workers to interact with their service providers. So I'll start with the demo, hoping here to capture a little bit about how we approach UX. Onboarding is very important, and this is where we spend actually a lot of our time. Today, we built a native app. It's based on the React Native framework. And we support 2 languages today, but we hope to be able to onboard different languages, other languages, sometime down the road. So a quick intro of what the app does. You notice we're not going to ask for a username or password or anything like that. One of the first challenges we're trying to solve with this digital agent is the problem of passwordless login. As we grow our portfolio of solutions, we don't want to complicate the process of being able to engage with these services by having to ask farm workers to manage an array of username and password credentials. For those phones that support biometric, Touch ID or Face ID, we give them the option to enable that. I'm on an emulator, so I can't use that option. And at this point, a digital wallet has been registered for this user. Again, we're using a custodial wallet solution. So there's a wallet registered.
So if I could ask, so as they're explaining the onboarding process, so what identity proofing is required, or is that not even a thing here? Like, how do they establish? Okay.
It is, but we chose to forego the identity proofing at the time of registering a wallet. We do that once you engage in the services. So because we're building services, or we're trying to expose services that are provided by different organizations, it really depends on the requirements for the organization to determine what level identity proofing is required for an interaction with that service. So for example, we have a digital ID demo here, and this kind of illustrates our approach. So here, to engage with this service is provided by the UFW Foundation. These are the services that you would get access to. And so
Okay, very, very good. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that.
Here's an example. And so the connection is the first step, and there's a dance that had to be kind of managed there. That these things happen asynchronously. So this was an issue that we're trying to simplify for the end user. But here's the first step, right? So in order to engage with this service, we'll ask that you verify either a phone number or an email address. So the digital ID sign-in is one of the 2 credentials our framework is currently working with. So here we're trying to illustrate, what are the claims that this digital sign-in credential contain. It's largely an encapsulation of the DID connection, the peer DID, and then a user role. And the user role is important for us because it identifies the privileges that the user is assigned, so that when they access an application, a web application.
So just what kind of DID and what kind of credential are being used here?
The DID is the Aries, a non-creds, I believe. So the digital wallet itself, that capability is being provided by a third party vendor. Okay, so now that we've got the digital ID sign-in credential, now here the user is given some instruction. Okay, what do you do with this, right? So you can go to, bear with me. If you're on a desktop client, you can choose to log in to the app with your digital sign-in credential. So you would do that by scanning the QR code. This is a pattern we've seen in several. It's a well-established pattern, at least for us. We're in the version 1 of the DID spec. But one of the challenges we encountered, okay, well, for farm workers, most of the solutions that they're going to be engaging with are either going to be in-app or they're going to be in a browser, in a mobile browser. So here's an instance where we implemented a flavor of DIDCOM to allow for seamless login from a mobile browser.
When you say flavor, is this DIDCOM v1 or DIDCOM v2 or a flavor of DIDCOM v2?
It's a what do you call it? A out of band message that we've kind of designed for ourselves using the DIDCOM v1 spec. So this is this is the end result of the digital ID done, was that your users procured a digital ID sign-in credential, and then they can use that credential to authenticate into a web-based service. Your documents. So here's an example of a different credential that would get provisioned in order to gain access to the service. I think I neglected to explain the branding here. Preparase, which is what we call this agent. Preparase is Spanish word for be prepared or get organized. And the reason for this is that the UFW Foundation, along with several other farm worker serving organizations, are they are advocates for the farm worker community, and so they work closely with our representatives. So since 2019, we've been close to getting farm worker modernization. There's been several flavors of legislation intended to provide large-scale immigration reform. And those programs have hit roadblocks. So most recently, a flavor of the Farm Worker Modernization Act passed our House of Representatives, but it hit a roadblock in the Senate. But this is something that's been kind of ongoing for since 2019, and that's largely what's been kind of fueling our work, is building the infrastructure that's going to allow, should immigration reform come, that these tooling, these capabilities will allow farm workers to prepare their documentation, get their stuff organized so that they can apply for that program should it ever come, right? So this is another example of a different digital ID credential. You see that this one, the document, it's really a document vault, and today, it's just storing documents securely in the cloud. Potentially, this could be replaced by an IPFS solution. But it has its own identity proofing, similar to the digital ID demo that I presented earlier. So the idea behind a digital ID credential is that there would be some documentation, some proof of identity that would accompany the material that a farmer would present when engaging in the service, and specifically would be an immigration service or be in a pandemic relief service that they would be applying for. There's some visual cues here that the protocol that we're implementing doesn't actually support it, but this is something where we would like to understand more how others are dealing with self-attested claims versus those that are actually vetted or verified. So that's what we're trying to illustrate here.
And if I could ask, so to that point of self-attested versus verified claims, are you using verifiable credentials? You mentioned the use of DIDs, but are you using W3C conformant verifiable credentials here? And can you talk a little bit to that and which DID methods you're using?
Like I said, this is a non-creds. So the provider we're using, we're currently on their version 1 of their SDK. They currently released or recently released a version 2 of their SDK which I think supports some of the newer specs for specifically the W3C verifiable credentials and JSON LD with BBS. But this is our version 1, and so it's just a very flat structure, key value. If I had chosen Spanish in the language when I onboarded the wallet, we currently have some UX, some UI trickery here where we would present these attributes in their Spanish form. The protocol version that we're on doesn't support that, but this is one of the things we hope that the protocols grow to be able to support as they evolve. And so the reason why we do this digital ID to protect the service is because there's some cloud infrastructure underneath and there's some costs associated to that. And so the UFW Foundation today is assuming those costs. Down the road, it could be, there could be a consortium of these organizations that collectively organize and establish a formal governance framework. And that would help us, figure out how these services would be paid for, right? These infrastructure services. So you can scan a document or select from files or select from your photo gallery. There's a bit of delay here. The file is being stored securely in the cloud. So here's the file now. I can view it. I can retrieve it from the cloud for temporary viewing. Or I can choose to share a secure link to this file. And here's another example where we use kind of our own DIDCOM v1 protocol, where a user would be be able to share this with somebody via message, or maybe embed this email in this link in an email, etc. What else? So we have this. One of the features I get most excited about is the secure chat. So here's an example of the secure chat. well, we've implemented a multi-channel chat feature. So in this case here, it's a support chat. And if I were to log in as we have a demo. So this isn't the prettiest interface, but it's mostly the capability is there. So here we have a list of all the chats that would come in from the digital agent. And as a contact center agent, I would be able to engage with this individual. I know that it's a real person because they would have gone through the identity verification in order to obtain that credential. So
it's like an asynchronous chat channel, so that
Yeah.
those chats may have come in minutes ago, but you can establish that deep link from that authenticated chat session, I guess, right?
that's correct. Yeah, and it also features a WebRTC capability. So I think on the emulator we have an issue. It doesn't actually render the video, but it does work. I can demo this from my phone if needed. This is a multi-participant chats here. So another example of DITCOM would be sharing access to the chat. So again, this is what I'm presenting is the capabilities that we built. These aren't actually how they would end up being used in practice. But here, we have a QR code that can be shared via email or message by another holder of our Preparase agent. Or we could share a link, and you see it's a deep link that would open into this chat. So another holder of our agent of our app would be able to join a chat through this feature. And then
Jorge, it looks like we
Yeah.
Jorge, it looks like we have a hand up. So Stavros, did you have a question? If you're off mute now.
Is there a question?
Looks like we can't hear you. I don't know if there's something wrong with the microphone or.
I mentioned earlier that our chat is multi-channel. So today we support SDK to SDK and native to SDK, but we also support SMS. So here's an example where I can bring in an SMS user into a chat. So here I'll use So here you see the delivery of the SMS message. Now this is a third participant on this chat, and third participant can contribute to the chat.
Who's the admin in the chat?
I'm sorry?
Who's the admin in the chat?
The admin is a user. I'm logged in currently here on this desktop client as a contact agent.
Got it.
So at this point, I can remove the SMS participant. And if I send another message, everyone else receives it except, and the SMS participant is no longer in the conversation. And then lastly, the USDA solution. We're still working on this. Again, our app is not live. We're still working through this, but this is an example of kind of an embedded experience. Specifically, the service is not an external, we're not going to link you out to a mobile browser. We're going to try to deliver the experience directly in the service. So here's an example of the Farm and Food Workers Relief Program, where an individual would be able to apply directly from the service. And then it'll first start by scanning a proof of identity. We're implementing a tool. We're implementing a third-party tool. It's a OCR. So the idea here is that you can scan an ID, and it supports. It's called Universal ID. So in theory, you can scan any passport or any state-issued or government-issued identification, and it would allow you to scan it. I can't scan it on the emulator, but I can join the Zoom from my phone and show you how that works.
Yeah, that's interesting. The concept of a universal scanner. You might be able to do that and maybe get decent optical character recognition. I heard of no universal document authenticators to determine the authenticity of a document. So if you're saying that universality is in terms of turning a photo into characters that could be recognized, I understand you. But can you talk about that, what capabilities this universal document recognizer does, or has, I should say?
I'll show you. It's an OCR engine that is 100% offline, so we can scan pretty much any document, any ID proof of ID document. So here's an example where I just scanned my father's Mexican electoral card.
Oh, the INE card. Yep. Right. So it's looking for cues on the document to say this is, the date of birth, and another, and then looking for text next to it. So it's not validating the INE card, but it's converting the labels and the text into formatted text. Gotcha.
That's correct, and it supports MRZ, so it's kind of universal. It's pretty cool. So like, here's another document. I have my expired global entry pass, and it'll scan an MRZ just as easily. And here, you see the data picked out of that, right? So the MRZ, the global entry pass, it's document type IG. I believe that's a specific one of the codes in the MRZ spec, but we're planning on using this to streamline the application process. So it's not a verification of the document, the document presented itself, but a picture of this. When you scan, we're currently automatically saving this to the document vault, so we can see that. Oh, I guess it didn't.
So so that's helpful for me, and just so that others understand, I guess, a little bit more, because I only understand a little bit more, because Jorge scanned that machine readable zone of an ICAO Doc 9303 ID1, it's called, that's a 3-line MRZ. What he's telling me, based on that example, is it's got more smarts than OCR only, because you have to know in that machine readable zone, the first 2 digits in the upper left are the document type. And then there's some check codes within that There's some country codes that are specific to countries. So what I just learned is that there's a bit more smarts in that they can interpret at least those type of documents as well. That there's some other smarts apart from OCR.
Correct.
So that's neat. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
By the
Alrighty.
way, if you just look at Google and ask for a card scanner that will do that, there's dozens of them out there. Just go search for one.
Oh, yes, you're absolutely right. There are dozens, but the fact that this one does it tells me that it does more than just OCR. But you're absolutely right. There's lots of MRZ scanners out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
The great thing about the choice we've made in the tool that we've selected is that it has it's 100% offline, which means that the entirety of the OCR engine is installed along with the app. So you can actually scan documents without having an internet connectivity, and it'll work just as great. This is important because the organizations that we're working with have field operations where they're working closely on boots on the ground in remote agriculture communities. And so, they do canvassing, they do, they've been involved last couple of years heavily in emergency relief. So, these events where Farmworker show up for, free meals, vaccinations, even cash assistance. And connectivity is an issue in these remote areas. So the offline capabilities is important.
Right. In your use case, do you have a need to handle for undocumented farm workers that may not have any form of state ID? Is there a need?
Yes, they're largely undocumented, but they're undocumented here in the US doesn't mean they don't have documents from their places of origin. So
okay,
we'll scan, Mexican passport just as fine, just as well as we can scan a US passport.
okay, thank you.
Jorge, do you hear me now? Because I think I fixed it.
Yes.
Okay. I have two questions, if I may. One, you mentioned secure documents, and then we are sharing a link. What is the secure part, since the link is shareable?
That's absolutely correct. And this in the current iteration, the idea would be that we could potentially share a document through a link, right? But you're right, it's not very secure because anybody with that link would then have access to that document. So we're still kind of working through that. We hope that there could be some kind of standard DIDCOM protocol or some other DID enabled protocol that would allow us to secure the link, with the private public key combinations between the DIDs, right? Between the peer DIDs, so that nobody could actually, get the contents of the document other than the intended recipient.
That's great. Thank you. And the second question I have is about the offline functionality. I completely understand that working on the field, we need to work around connectivity issues. And I understand that the OCR functionality is covered. What other functionalities of the wallet, however, did you manage to bring offline? For example, can we verify signatures? Can we verify authenticity of documents offline? What other parts of or services work offline?
I think that it's a great question. We're only getting started, so the possibilities are endless. What we're working towards is some of the use cases that we are currently working on, right? Like, so emergency relief is one. The Alivio example where a farm worker could apply submit, complete an intake form offline, or maybe a volunteer or an actual organizer who's out in the field, canvassing, and they're doing intakes with their own phones, with the app on their own phones, and they're offline, so they can, if there's 100 farm workers that show up to an event and they want to sign up for this program, for the Farm and Food Workers Relief Program, they would be able to take 100 intakes completely offline. And then when they come back home, they can synchronize with the server to move those intakes through the process.
Thank you so much, Jorge.
Mhm.
Had a question. Thank you for walking through that. Around the simplification of the identities. And I'm just curious, how did you guys look at the problem around, ensuring that these users don't really understand PKI and putting it in a format they understand, based on like kind of behavior and patterns that we have in software and products today?
Yeah, I think that, the problem today with, how people try to engage with, any user that has a phone number, an SMS, or an email, right? You get bombarded. I get bombarded daily with messages from organizations and providers that have no idea who they are. Those messages might include deep, short links or deep links to take me to some website that I have no idea what I'm going to click on. So I largely ignore those. So the idea here is that, there's an education process. We've been working with these organizations for a couple of years, and we've been piloting our app. Again, the app's not available in the app stores yet, but we have received feedback, and we have a team of researchers that are helping us on that front. Is it's very iterative, but we're getting close to actually test this out with farm workers, actual farm workers, and we expect to take their feedback close to heart.
Good to know. I see. Okay, so still kind of collecting that input. And I looked at this problem actually with farm workers as well a few years ago for a client, and was certainly interesting to see kind of their approach to data input and sort of managing their identity. So look forward to your feedback.
Yeah, I think the important thing here is that to recognize that for this community of farm workers, the organizations that serve them, these are organizations that have a long standing in advocacy and fighting for these farm workers here in the US don't have the same rights as we all do. The labor laws actually explicitly exclude farm workers. And so it's these organizations that have been active, for 50 plus years. The United Farm Workers, the labor union. So it's their trust really that enables this way of interacting, and we hope that it will continue to extend their trust to the digital.
Or I have a question along those lines, right? So it's very unique in the communities that you serve. You have advocates, you have field agents who may be, helping to facilitate the intake, managing those apps, right? So in the terms of trust, are the interactions with the wallet delegated to those field agents, right? So if I'm a farm worker, but my identity is on a device that's managed by a field agent, how have you looked at the concept of delegated administration of identity wallet and that sort of facilitation, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the delegation of the app itself, that's something that or delegation of the actions that are, you know, triggered, right? So for example, hey, we need you to present, you know, we need to present, share this information, share a document or share your ID in the context of service delivery. We know that, you know, in the case of DACA, DACA is an interesting case, right? Because we're talking about, and by the way, I didn't define DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. That's what the acronym stands for. But these are, you know, individuals that, you know, have grown up here in the US. They speak English. They are engineers or, you know, firefighters or doctors. And they just don't have the luxury of being able to live here without the fear of deportation. Their parents are the farm workers, or their family members are the farm workers. And so the ability to be able to, for a farm worker, you know, a 65-year-old farm worker who's still active in the fields, picking, harvesting, if his son or daughter can take responsibility to take an action on behalf of his father or mother from their own digital agent through a process of delegation, that's something we've definitely looked at and are planning on, you know, hopefully solving for that. We haven't done that yet because, you know, we just haven't been able to get to that. But it is a problem we hope to be able to solve. And we hope to not have to solve it ourselves, but that the community as the larger community, this is a problem that we, you know, we can also undertake as a community and solve for this problem.
Thank you for that.
All right, just looking at the time, we got about 5 minutes left. Any last questions for Jorge?
I have one. If the source code of this application is open source and available on GitHub.
So it's not open source currently. We are leveraging a lot of open source dependencies. Like I said, we're building on top of React Native. And so a lot of the underlying functionality we've been able to bring in through open source React Native packages. Our app itself, by the way, our whole stack, we're building on top of a low code platform. So it's a commercially available low code platform. I like to think of it as a, you know, utility, just like AWS. I can go to AWS and stand up a EC2 instance. I could go to a low code platform and develop a low code application and deploy it on their cloud, on the provider's cloud, and being able to provide this type of functionality at this level of quality and security. It's a utility. We are actually looking for ways of open sourcing our wallet agent to make it available for other, you know, nonprofit or public service organizations to be able to leverage it. We're open for ideas on how to be able to do that, given the fact that we are building on top of a low code platform.
Tracy, if I could, I'd like to thank Jorge for presenting something which shows how people that I call normal users might be able to use digital wallets. There's another example I'd like to bring to the group, and that is the Louisiana mobile driver's license, which has already got 44% penetration into that particular market. Might show another example of how digital wallets can actually be successful.
Yeah, I think that would be great, Tom. If you want to make that introduction, we can get that scheduled on the agenda. I too would like to thank Jorge for his time. I think there was a lot of interesting conversation and discussion, a lot of good ideas and thoughts. I think requirements maybe potentially came out of this conversation. So just thank you so much for attending, and that's why I did let this conversation go the whole time, because I thought it was more useful to continue this as we went through. So Thank you, Jorge, for showing up. Thank you, Tom, for recommending this as a topic for discussion. I think it was a very fruitful conversation. Jorge, there was one question at the very beginning about whether or not you would be able to share the deck with us, the presentation that you had. If you want to send that to me, I can make sure that that gets included in the meeting notes for anybody who might be interested in taking a look at that.
Yes, will do. I don't think it should be a problem. I just gotta ask for permission from the UFW Foundation, but
Okay,
I'll get back to you by end of day.
no problem, no problem. So with that, I want to thank you everybody for attending, and we will talk again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.